Okay, taking apart the shutter. Let's start at the back here. I want this post off to start with. See if I can get under there with a couple of screwdrivers. I'll pop that to one side. This little wheel, there are two tiny grub screws running into that. See if I can get at those. Well, I've backed them up, but that's not moving. I'll back them up a bit more in case they are seated in recesses in the shaft. I wouldn't expect that they are. And see if that gear will lift off. Yeah, it did. No problem. Right. Well, we can take this, the shutter itself here out of the focus mount next. We've got 3 screws here. This shutter is, for all practical purposes, identical to that on a Voigtlander Automatic. It's upside down from the shutters on the retina reflexes. The retinas have their cocking mechanism coming in at the top of the shutter, and on the Automatics and on this Paxette Automatic Reflex, the cocking action happens at the bottom of the shutter. So in order to make that all look nice, these rings are reversed. Okay, so let's take these rings off the front. That's our rings. It's the shutter speed setting ring. It's pretty grimy. This intermediate ring here couples the aperture settings and the shutter speed settings together so that they counter rotate. This is the lever that cocks the arm on the back of the lens to open the aperture up to full aperture for viewing. This brass ring should come off here, but it's gummy. It's just sticky. It should be coming off. There's nothing mechanical holding that in, just filth and old dried grease. And the front ring here, the aperture setting ring, unlike the retina reflexes, it doesn't have a return spring. It's just loose. Except this one's not very loose because it's sticky. Well, it does have a return spring on this one. Okay. I was just making a liar of me. Alright. It does have a return spring. Would certainly do no harm. Take out the shaft here and this little pinion. And we'll get the 3 screws off from around here. Right, let's take the front off the shutter. 3 screws. This one's half hidden here, just move that out of the way. It's better. Gather those three up. Lift the shutter off. In here loose, we have a little detent ball, tiny pinion and a cover plate. Here's our front plate. This is where your lens mounts on your camera. The shutter itself, well, there's the front, here's the back. Let's start here. 3 screws, 2 of which I previously removed when I didn't need to. Because I thought I was looking at some different screws. Take that plate off. This plate should come off with a bit of a wriggle. That's your settings lever for your flash sync self-timer. Okay, be careful of this flash contact coming out the back. It's easy to make a mess of that. And I see my camera battery saying it's tired, so I'll just make a start on this. Remove the front retaining ring. Remove the shutter speed settings cam plate. We can remove this catch. We can remove the cocking shaft with its pinion. We can remove the internal cocking ring. Okay, what else? We can take the main spring off that shutter. I'll have an inspect that. That's in very good order. You can see there, if you count this arm as being at 12 o'clock, let's put that back where it was. This arm's at about the 2 o'clock position. That looks like a brand new spring. That's what they're supposed to look like, which tells me that this camera either had that replaced when it was last serviced and was never used after that, or alternatively the camera's never seen much work at all, either because the owner didn't know how to use it, or it didn't work very well and he didn't enjoy it. Okay, I'll stop here and change my camera battery. Alright, let's take a few more pieces off this shutter. Unhook this spring so it's no longer under tension. Remove the 2 screws that hold that lever in place. Take that lever off. What's this? It's a hair. Right, take off the flash contact. Take off this little lever, which drives the flash, part of the flash sync mechanism. I'll unhook this spring. Just going to find a suitable front of a camera body to park this shutter on while I'm working on it, just so that I don't damage this flash contact any more than I need to. Well, this is a front plate off a Retina Reflex S, and I'm just using as a place to hold this thing up. Alright, so this spring here, I need to stretch that out and unhook it. So normally I'll put something behind this lever so it doesn't swing out of the way. Grab my spring, just move it forward and unhook it. This lever, that's the shutter release. Here's the spring we just unhooked. This lever can come off. This little pallet wheel can come off. It's the main cam. I'm taking that out of the shutter. One screw holds the self-timer, the delay action in place. Two screws hold the retard gear train in place. That one's got a large head on it. This is just a short screw. That can come out of the body. Alright, and we start getting the tricky springs out. This is where stuff gets entertaining. You don't want to lose any of these springs, and they're small. So there's a spring seated right here on this lever. It hooks round a post there, and this end of the lever there. I'm putting a toothpick over the middle of it so it doesn't ping off into space. I'll release it from the lever. You can see it was under tension. Put that spring carefully to one side. There's a screw over here. I need a forked screwdriver to deal with that really. And the only question is, did I pick up the right one? Looks like I did. That post serves as the anchor point for the long spring that ran from the flash sync mechanism. This is the B lever. If I can wiggle that off its post. It's got a return string of its own on it here. Just release that spring. It's another small spring. One, be careful not to lose it. I'll open the shutter blades up, get that B lever out I think. Hold that catch back. That back, there the B lever can swing now, get that out. That's all I need to take off the top of the shutter there. We'll get into the back of the shutter, split it open and remove the blades. So we've got three screws hold the case together. That screw's somewhat mutilated looking, like someone slipped with their screwdriver and didn't do good things to it. I'm supporting this from underneath. I should be able to get the case off. There we can see the shutter blades. Now there are 6 blades. This is the 6th blade. It goes in exactly the same spot as the number 1 blade below it. See if I can get these seated. You can see how they went. Yeah, these are a bit oily and probably contributed quite a bit to the fact that the shutter didn't want to work correctly. So that short blade I showed you was number 6. This would be blade 5. 4, 3. Yeah, 2 is an odd shape. See, it's got a steep cut out in the back of the blade here, compared with these that don't. So 2 is a special blade. It's to clear this hole here where the shaft comes through. And number 1 blade is like number 3, 4 and 5. Tip those blades off there for a second. Here's our mechanism plate. This is just about stripped down. We have 3 screws. Hold this together. Now the screw in this position, it passes through this bracket, is probably about 1/4 millimetre longer than its mates. You've got to be sure to get them right back in the right position, because if you put the short screw where the long screw should be, it'll only catch half the threads in the plate, and as a result, when you start to tighten it up, it's inclined to strip out. And if you put a long screw where the short screw should be, it'll stick out through the plate and it'll foul the shutter blades and cause the shutter to jam and fail to move. Alright, so there's the blade actuating ring, and here's our mechanism plate. So all of these pieces I need to clean now carefully, just using naphtha and cotton buds, Q-tips, and everything should go back together smoothly. No arguments, and there's nothing I see in front of me which tells me that the shutter won't work perfectly once it's cleaned and lubricated appropriately. Well, here are all the blades. I've cleaned them all. There's a little bit of damage on this blade here. It suggests to me that when the shutter case was put back together at some stage, that blade wasn't seated correctly over its pin, and it was caught between the mechanism plate and the case, and that's caused a little dent to rise there. There's also the tip of that blade. It seems to have a bit of an edge on it, like it's been thumped into something. That's a bit unusual. What I'll do is I'll just put this down on a steel plate. I've got a bench block here somewhere, and then just force that blade down flat like this with the tail of my tweezers, and that'll just take that lump off it where it's bent up slightly. And I'll do the same at the tip, but I'm not expecting that to cause me any problems. That's just something that's happened to this while it was being serviced, I would imagine. It's got to have been when the shutter was apart and it was being put back together. Right, let's just get that blade to one side so I can deal with it separately. Yeah, that's got that levelled out. Let's have a go at this tip. Yeah, you can certainly feel a bump there. I think that'll be okay. I'll give that a quick clean. It's going back in regardless. It certainly, I don't expect that to cause me any problems. I'll just give that a clean with a bit of naphtha. And this is just what I did for all the other blades. They're all in quite good condition. Not much oiliness on them. They'll be fine. Let's turn that blade around. Okay, so next I want to clean the mechanism plate up, and I'll just do that again with some naphtha and cotton buds, and I want to get rid of all traces of the old grease, all the dust and rubbish that it's accumulated over time, and get this back to a nice clean metal. And I'll lubricate it with what I think is appropriate. Once I reassemble it, you can see coming off on the cotton bud there, that's just old lubricant and dust and dirt. Now all of these levers seem to move freely enough of their own accord, so you know there's no serious problem there. I'll just make sure this face in particular, it's important to have clean, because this is the face that the shutter blades run against. If there's any oiliness, it's likely to be on this surface, oiliness that you should be concerned about. If you get a shutter that is very, very oily, which is usually a sign that someone's applied far too much or inappropriate lubricants, you may have to clean it 2 or 3 times to get rid of all the oil, because what happens is that residual oils will hide in all the pits and pockets. As soon as you turn your back, it'll sneak back out onto the surfaces that you're most concerned about. You can flood clean something like this. You could even use one of those brake clean products or something and do a real job of it, but that's usually not necessary. Now this case, the rear plate in the case doesn't need to come out unless it's very oily, in which case you want to clean behind it. There's nothing happening in there, but I need to make sure that the screws are tight, because if the screws come loose, they'll back out and catch a shutter blade. That seems fine. So I'll just clean the inside of the case with naphtha. There's probably some grease in here of some sort, some lubricant on this detent spring right here. I'll easily work around to that last. There's certainly some oil in this case. I can tell by the oily finish there. The general rule is you never have put oil into a shutter, but there's probably exceptions to every rule, including that one. There's nothing exceptional about this shutter, it just looks fairly normal to me. Where that grease was there for that detent spring, I'm just cleaning that away. And I'll clean the outside of the case. Where the flash sink setting lever runs at the back. Around here is good too. The case itself, apart from that's probably okay. And here where the setting pinion for the aperture runs through there. Alright, that case looks fine to me. Put that to one side. Well, that means that the mechanism plate can be put back together now. These are the last components we need to worry about here. The lens tube. That will normally have old grease around the outside edge of it. Front and back. Where the blade actuating ring runs. And where the setting, the internal cocking ring and shutter speed settings cam plate go around the outside of that piece. And here is the blade actuating ring. This is the piece that oscillates from left to right, and as it does so it swings the shutter blades into the open position and back into the closed position. Usually this has been lubricated with graphite grease or something of a similar nature. You can lubricate it with graphite powder, and that works well too. Okay, those bits are done. Here's our mechanism plate. Just make sure that spring's sitting on its seat. Just hook this in under that spring. Should sit like that. I need to get this spring hooked over that pin. There you go, so that's sprung loaded, and like all sprung loaded things, it's waiting to jump across the room. Now the lens tube only goes on one way. And it goes on one way because one of these three posts here has got the side chewed off to clear this pin. There are 3 screws. One of them is longer than its mates, and the long one goes over here. And it's longer because it has to pass through this bracket. Just check that everything's there, nothing's locked up, and stuff moves. There's latches that will stop this thing from moving. The first one is this one, which is the self-timer latch. I'm pulling that back out the way. The second one is this latch, which holds the mechanism in the locked position. And this lever here will also interfere with things. This is part of the activator for the flash sync mechanism. That's all moving freely. I'm quite happy with the state of that. I'll just nip those 3 screws up tight. How tight do you do them? Well, just right, just nice. It's one of those things you can only learn by feel and by experience probably. Alright, so this is together, but it's got no lubrication at all at the moment. I'm going to lubricate that with some graphite powder because that's how I prefer to do it. Okay, a bit of graphite powder here. Just work that in. It doesn't take much. Knock the excess off, I just do it in this container so I always know where the graphite is. That's the stuff as I buy it. Just comes from the local hardware. It's made for doing locks, lubricating locks generally. Okay, I'll just go and blow this out. I'll just set this to the blade's open position. Which is with this hard against that post, and put the blades in place. So they've only got to go in the right order and everything will be good. Start with blade number 1 here. Blade number 2, this is the big cutout at the back, goes here. Blade number 3, same as blade number 1. Blade 4. Blade 5. And 6 is the cover blade. Leaf blade shutters with interchangeable lenses frequently have a cover blade. It is insurance against light rays penetrating where you don't want them to. Now I've just got a greasy mark on that one, I'll just clean it. Blade number 6 goes right directly over blade number 1. And normally I swing this across a bit to swing the edges of those blades in from the outside so that I can get the case over it. Here's our case. This round peg has to come up through this square hole. Why is it a square hole? It's anyone's guess. I'm holding that case together. I'll check that the blades open and close smoothly. And they do, so everything's in place. The 3 screws hold the case and the mechanism plate together. One of them was somewhat chewed up, so I've replaced it with another one. It's not particularly critical. Could have used the ugly screw in there, I just prefer not to. And the blades move nice and freely there. So, let's put it back in our stand made from an old camera front and start putting the other bits back in the shutter. Right, I'm going to put the springs back in there. This one goes in first. and it goes here. Watch these springs because they'll do their best to zip away across the other side of the room. So the bent leg of the spring goes behind here. The straight leg has to hook round this stud. See if I can do this in a manner that you can see what I'm doing. No, it's doing its best to get away. There it is. That's hooked behind here and it's hooked on that stud, so this is also sprung loaded. The B lever spring next. This fits over this post, and there's a groove in that post that it seats into. I'll swing that end across there, and I'll open the blades on the and to allow the B lever to drop in. So I'll hold back this clip, push the blade actuating ring forward. That'll allow me to put the B lever in position. There's a notch on the back of the B lever. Right here, it has to pick up that spring. See if I can do this in a manner that allows you to see what I'm actually doing. So if I slide the lever in, hook the spring into that notch, and seat the lever over its post. And it's just sitting there. This screw and its spring, I need to get that onto a screwdriver. Fit it into position. The screwdriver's a bit long and the tangs on it catch on the spring. The end of the spring has to be lifted up and goes against the inside of the lens tube there. Let's see if we can put you in a position where you can see it. so that the one end of the spring is against the lens tube, the other end is against this lever. Now if I lift the B lever here, I should be able to pull back the blade actuating ring and the blades will close. So far so good. I'm going to lubricate a couple of points here with some molybdenum paste. You could use graphite grease for this job. This point on the blade actuating ring, on the opposites, let's move that along a bit so you can see what I'm doing. Opposite that point there's a little stud there where this lever will drop in and latch, where this lever will lift up off that point there, and this spring here, that's the detent. So I just need to get a bit of molybdenum paste on that so that that detent here, which is quite firm, doesn't make the operation too stiff. Hold that lever back out of the way. I can just check the feel of that. It feels nice and smooth. This point right here is where the B lever will drop in. I'll just put a wipe on there for good measure. It feels good. Alright, what's next? Oh, I think all the flash sync gear would be a good thing to put onto it next.